So I want to say good evening, everyone, but looking out the window with the sun out here today, it seems like good afternoon is a little bit more appropriate. But that being said, it is 6:01, so we'll call our March 23rd Town Council meeting to order. And if we could kindly take a moment of silence to acknowledge our civil servants, firefighters, police officers, military personnel who have dedicated and lost their lives protecting our safety, our freedom, and our democracy. Thank you all. In accordance with Mass General Law, tonight's meeting, or should I say this afternoon's meeting, is being audio and video recorded. And if anyone in our audience is recording as well, could you please identify yourself? Don, are you seeing anyone? I'm going to
Nope, I do not see anybody.
Thanks. I'm sure it takes you a while to scan around with an audience.
No, I'm trying to get the Facebook going.
Okay. All right, we'll leave you alone here.
Oh, no, it's fine.
This meeting is being held virtually via a Zoom webinar pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Jeannie, anyone signed up for public comments?
No, there has not been.
Okay, council comments? Pat? And it looks like, Pat, do you have a comment?
Yes,
Go ahead.
thanks, Mike. I want to address the member of the council. I've received calls and other inquiries about my possibly presenting a laundry list of changes I believe we should consider making to the charter. I do have some suggestions, some of which the charter committee has considered and some not. I would love to share these with you ahead of time, but the open meeting law prevents me from having sent it around. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I pushed so hard to form a council subcommittee so we could do this, conscientiously review all the councilors' suggestions that will be offered tonight. I do want to compliment the hard work of the Charter Review Committee. I only find a couple of recommendations they made that I would question, with the other changes being fine, but it's what they did not recommend that concerns me. Over the past 5 years, our council has experienced a number of problems with the charter, which I expected would have been a starting point for the review committee to address. For example, we've experienced that the 45-day veto really didn't work. The charter review committee left it as is and did not consider any alternatives to it. Numerous questions have been raised regarding our members' communications with our department heads. As you can see, these challenges weren't addressed. The bylaw process, which is multiple public hearings and handoffs, is a real hassle. The review committee did not streamline these procedures. They actually added a new requirement on top of the current process. When I and other councilors present our suggestions tonight, I'm sure I can speak for all of us that our intent is to take a charter that works pretty darn well and make it work just a little better. And the place to start is with the charter terms that have given us trouble over the last 5 years. So the question is not, do we want a strong manager or a strong council? No. The question is, in what small ways could the charter maybe be tweaked to support an even better working relationship between the two branches, which after all share responsibility for our town? That's what I hope we can consider tonight, right after we thank Larry and the review committee and approve, I assume, nearly all the recommendations. So I look forward to our discussions later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Marilyn?
Point of order, I just got a phone call from Larry. As you see, he's not on the screen. He had some technical issues. He's trying to sign on with another computer. So give him some time, but he's coming. And sorry, Pat, I missed most of what you said. Okay, that's all.
Thanks for the update. In meeting with Mary this week, I didn't feel that a manager's report was necessary at this meeting. As you know, we are possibly meeting tomorrow evening, but definitely meeting a week from today. So I'm going to pass on the manager's report and move to the approval of our March 9th open session minutes. If I could have a motion, please.
I make a motion to approve the March 9th open session minutes.
Second.
The motion's been made and second. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, we'll roll call vote it. Marilyn?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Kathy? Kathy's muted.
Yes, I was trying to unmute, but yes.
Good thing I can read lips, so. Don?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And I believe we have everyone. A lot of faces tonight. Thank you. I don't believe we have any communications or correspondence this evening. There are no public hearings under orders of the day. No licensing matters, no financial matters. Tonight's meeting basically is all about the charter review. And that being said, under old business, there is a motion to approve the proposed budget documentation, and I would like to make a motion to table this to a further point in time.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing and seeing none. Don?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes,
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And Tom?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Under new business, as we spoke of earlier, the Charter Review Committee recommendations is the topic for this evening. I'm not sure if Larry's here at this point in time, but I thought I'd give us a brief scenario on how we planned on committing this task. And what I would like to do is run through the entire document. I believe everyone has copies, and we can mark up whatever we'd like as a safety net. Jeannie or Jackie, maybe you can mark it as well. Once we've reviewed the entire, I believe, 32 pages, we can revisit those items. Those will make it much easier for us and the general public that's viewing tonight to be able to follow the entire procedure and how we're attempting to conduct business this evening. So I would also like some participation. I can start off with the first couple of pages, but as I said, there's about 32 pages to run through, and that will be the first segment of the meeting. After we finish that, then we can entertain council suggestions, comments, or any input or changes that they might want to try tweaking the document with. So if we start off with the, I'm going to start off even with page 1 here, which is the table of contents. Has everybody had a chance to review it, and are we comfortable with the table of contents? Okay, it looks like there's no questions there. We go to page 2, starting at the top with the preamble, running down to sections 1 through 5. Are the suggested changes by the committee accepted, or is there anything we'd like to mark? Marilyn?
Just for information, the blue or red added text beneath preamble, that's for our use right now. Once the charter is adopted, those pieces will be removed. They're not permanently located. They're just sort of housekeeping issues. That's why we put them there, but they will not stay.
Okay, so obviously then there's no amendments, and that's what I thought. Everyone's comfortable with page 2. We move along to page 3, and if I'm going too fast, slow me down here, but I'll start with, on the top, it's section 1 and 6 for intergovernmental relations, ending with the initiative petition down on the bottom. So I'm guessing that we're not marking anything on page 3 as well. So flipping on the back side here, the first subject is the word law, ending with town agency on the bottom of page 4. Is everyone comfortable with the committee's recommendations on page 4? Okay, page 4 looks good. Okay, here we go. Marilyn, would you like to take the next 4 or 5 pages for me?
Sure. All right, we're picking up with page 5. It starts with town bulletin boards, and it ends with, it ends with the paragraph that starts, "The president shall prepare the agenda for council meetings." So it starts with the duties of the president, or ends with the duties of the president, vice president, and the clerk. Any comments or questions? Okay, Don, I see your hand.
Town bulletin boards, comment on that. And then section 2.3, president, vice president, clerk, that those first and second paragraphs. I'll reserve that for later.
You said section 2.3.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't have a color version. I'm just working off black and white.
That's
Section
okay.
3, president, vice president, clerk. Mine, the gray is dark. It looked different. So
All right.
section 3, president, vice president, clerk.
We'll just mark that section and we'll discuss it. Tom?
I also have a question on this page. Under section 2.2, eligibility.
Okay,
I'd like to just mark that for further discussion.
okay. Anyone else on that page? So for future, we're talking about town bulletin boards, section 2.2, eligibility, section 2-3, president, vice president, and clerk. Okay, Pat?
I have a point of order question for Mike. I was under the impression that we were going to go through this from beginning to end, just looking at the comments that the review committee brought forward and not any comments that we might want to add or intersperse, so that we could review the entire document that they presented first and then add our suggestions later. If that's not the case, I've had a couple of points I would have made, but I believe that Mike indicated that we'd be going through it twice. Mike?
I did indicate that we would be coming back through it. So this would be a little redundant, and so maybe we can continue as we spoke about, but just go through the entire document like we said. But I'm hoping everyone's had a chance to review the document so we can move through it pretty quickly. But why don't we continue on that, and then as I stated earlier, we can mark these items and come back to them.
So if I may, Mike,
Please.
My question is, if Pat has a comment he wants to make on one of these pages, is he waiting until we get through the entire document and then he's gonna hit it the second go around? Or is it smart to just, whatever page we're on and whatever questions are gonna come up, mark them and then move on, regardless of whether it's the committee's report or whether it's Pat's questions?
Right, we'd have to mark them individually so we know what we're returning to.
Right, and that
we can either do it as a group, as we're doing right now, but we're not opening it up for discussion. We're just marking those items that we want to return to. So if everyone's comfortable with that, if I didn't explain it or it's not being done exactly as I explained it, I think this process will work if we continue like we're doing. But it's not, obviously, it's not open for discussion at this point until we go through. Pat?
Thank you, Mike. Then I want to go back to page 3.
I think that's the way to do it. We'll do it, and then we'll continue with this process. And everyone will have it marked up rather than marking it up individually.
I see Josh Levine now.
Yeah, look at that.
Go to the lower left. I got that.
So on page 3, I have a question regarding full council,
Great.
which I will raise later.
Okay. And so I'm going to mark that on mine. It's under full council.
right.
And I'm actually going to put initials here just so we remember. So I'll put a PH next to that. 3's done. I think I did 4 as well. Anything on 4, Pat?
And on page 5, I have a question regarding compensation for town council members.
Okay.
Got it.
It's buffering.
And I
Okay.
apologize. I had hoped that we would review the document that the review committee gave us and put that aside and say, good, done, yes, nice. But if we don't do it all at the same time, that's fine.
I think we'll get to the same place. I'm initialing too where the comments come from with the support of you all helping me read these documents into the record. So I think it's going to work well. So page 5 is complete, correct?
My wife, I'll blame my wife.
All right, Michael, you want me to continue with page 6?
Sure. Why don't you take it up to, I'm going to just say roughly page 10 and then we'll.
You know what? It's buffering a long time. Should I just shut down and start again?
I guess Larry's trying to get in. That's what we're hearing in the background.
Maybe he's on
Okay.
Josh's computer.
The top of page 6 starts with committees of the council and ends with paragraph, a full, accurate, up-to-date account of the proceedings. Any comments or questions on page 6? Kathy?
I would like to later discuss the paragraph beginning all meetings of the council. It's under 2-4.
Anyone else? Pat Henry?
I would like to revisit the last paragraph, starting with a full, accurate, up-to-date account.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to page 7. Starts with section 2-5, general powers and duties, and ends with the paragraph prior to final passage. Any comments on page 7? Tom?
I'd like to come back and revisit section 2-5, general powers and duties for discussion.
2-5. Okay. Anyone else? Pat?
I'd like to revisit the town bylaws, section 2-6, please.
Anyone else? Okay. That takes care of page 7. Moving on to page 8. It starts with declared an emergency and ends with section 2-8 vacancy. Additions, comments, questions? Pat?
Section 2-8 vacancy. I have a question.
Ralph?
I think this was the paragraph that Jesse had made a suggestion for a change, notwithstanding above the codification.
The addition of the language regarding zoning bylaws, correct?
Yes. Okay.
So we'll mark that. Anyone else? Okay, that takes care of page 8. Moving on to page 9, begins with advertised on the town website and ends with section 2-10 prohibitions. Any questions, comments? Ralph?
On 210, I'd like to come back to it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Pat?
Another vote for 210.
Well, we've got it written once. I'm sure we can take care of it. Anyone else? Okay, that's it for page 9. And now page 10 starts with Article 3, Town Manager, and ends with Section 3-2, item number 1, shall appoint. Any questions or comments? Tom O'Connor?
I'd like to come back and revisit parts of section 3-1.
Okay. And Patrick, you had your hand up again.
Thank you, Marilyn. Yes, I'd like to revisit the residency requirement. And I'd also like to revisit the last sentence.
Can you
Under three-
please tell me where the residency requirement is? Where's it located?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's
Third paragraph.
in 3-1, third paragraph.
Okay, thanks for the location. Anyone else?
In the
Okay.
5th paragraph as well.
Pat, you had a second thing?
The fifth paragraph, which is a duplication.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Mike, that's up to page 10.
Okay, on page 10, were we marking up section 3.2?
I don't have anything.
No,
Okay, Pat, I thought you said paragraph 6, so just to complete my notes here. Is that,
I have down Pat Henry has a question on, there shall be an annual review of the town manager's job performance. Is that correct, Pat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
and that's what I was missing, so thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Pat, while we have you, do you want to take 11 through 15?
Sure. 11 through 15 starts with "and employees," which is more of the powers and duties of the manager. And it ends with the number 9, shall have full jurisdiction over the rental and use.
Great.
And I have a question I'd like to raise on the first paragraph of that page.
Is that number 2?
No, it's actually the remains of number 1,
Okay.
but maybe it's on both pages.
Got it.
And also paragraph number 5.
Okay.
Everybody good?
Yeah, that
Anybody else?
covered the 2 I was looking at as well.
All right, then moving to page 12, starting with number 10 and ending with number 18. Do I hear any questions? Seeing none, I will move to page 13, starting with number 19 and ending with section 4.1 general provisions. Do I see any questions? Good. Page 14. Starting with the other offices to be filled by ballot and ending with section 4.3 school committee vacancy. Page 14. Looking for questions. Good. See, Marilyn, you gave me the easy part.
Okay, I don't mind working.
Page 15, starting with committee members under this section and ending with merit principle. Page 15. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, a question on Article 5, Section 5-1, organization of town agencies. I'd like to revisit that.
Anyone else? I also have a question on the last paragraph on page, in section 5.1, last paragraph in section 5.1 on page 15. Anyone else? Okay, that's 5 pages down. How many
Thanks,
more?
Pat. Thank you for your help. Kathy, because your microphone's muted, I'm going to pick on you.
I'm not muted. Page 16,
Please.
and that begins all appointments and promotions of town officers and ends with step 1, the president of the town council shall call a joint meeting. Are there any concerns there? Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to revisit Section 5-4, appointment of board, commission, and committee members.
Okay. Anyone else? Pat, I'm sorry.
I would also like to revisit section 5.4, but more at the bottom, the 45 days town
Okay.
manager presentation.
Got it. Okay. Anything else on page 16? Moving on then, on page 17, it begins conditions of the town and ends with section 6.3B, contents, the capital improvement plan. Are there any concerns or comments there on page 17? Okay, seeing none, moving to 18. Page 18 begins C, public hearing, and ends with the order in which names of candidates appear on the ballot. Any questions or concerns on page 18? Good. Seeing none. Page 19 begins section 7.-2, nonpartisan elections, and finishes with section 7-4, application of general law. Concerns or questions? Hearing none, we can move to page 20. On page 20, it begins Article 8, citizen relief mechanisms, and at the bottom, 8-3, section B, referral to the town attorney. Concerns or questions? Okay, moving on to page 21, that starts with the word committee, if the opinion of the town attorney, and ends with section E, supplemental petitions. Concerns or questions on page 21? We have a batting streak going here. Page 22 begins with section F, publication, and ends with section 8-4C, referral to the town attorney. Questions on page 22? Page 23 then begins petition in writing, advise the town council, all the way down to the subtitle section 8-6, measures with conflicting provisions. Questions or concerns? Page 24 begins with number 2 or more proposed matters passed at the same election, and ends with section D, office holder, that full paragraph. Any concerns on 24? Seeing and hearing none, moving on to page 25, beginning election, comma, that person will not be allowed to have, and ending with section 9-3, periodic review of bylaws. Concerns or comments? Seeing none, moving to page 26. Begins with the words, bylaws shall be under the supervision of the town attorney, and ends section 9-10, uniform procedures applicable to multiple member boards. Questions, concerns? Hearing none, page 27, beginning section A, meetings, all multiple member bodies, and finishes with section 10-2, bylaw review. Questions and concerns? Okay. You want me to keep going, Tom? Mike?
I kind of feel like we're on a roll. Maybe you're bringing us some
We're
luck.
not that far. Okay, page 28 starts, council shall vote upon the recommendation, and finish with section 10-7, elections and elected and appointed positions. Questions or concerns? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll go to page 29. Purposes of this initial election of the council only, and finishes with the paragraph, limitations on office holding. Any points there to raise? Okay, page 30. Starts with section 10-8, departments, and finishes with section 10-9, appointed boards. Moving to page 31. Begins board as is reasonably possible, and ends with section 10-10, transition provisions. And finally, page 32. Starts chapter enhancements approved by town council, and ends with article 3, town manager formally read shall appoint and may suspend or remove. Questions or concerns there? Tom?
Yes, I hate to break our streak on the last page, but I'd like to revisit Article 3, Town Manager, Section 2, Powers and Duties, number 1.
Okay. Anything else on page 32? Good. Okay, Mike, back to you.
Right. Thank you for your help, everyone. Gonna juggle my pile here. So if my notes are correct, if we move over to page 3 under full council, we can start with Pat. I believe you had a comment for page 3.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I still find the words notwithstanding any vacancy that might exist to be unclear. So I'd like to make a motion. I move to change the definition of full council to the words full council shall mean the entire authorized complement of the town council, comma, less any positions unfilled at the time.
Okay, Ralph?
So
I'll be right with
the
you.
actual meaning of full council,
Ralph, could you hold just for 1 minute, please?
Sure.
I'm sorry. Don?
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know Larry's on his way here. He has a machine issue, a connection issue at the house. So he will be joining as soon as he gets here to the studio. So he's gonna basically sit down right here and participate from there. So five minutes or so, he should be here.
Okay, maybe you can, well, we'll see him on the screen, I guess, when he jumps in, but thanks for the update.
Yep.
And Ralph, I'm sorry.
no, that's
ahead.
okay. So we had a large discussion with regards to what full council was. And what it basically came down to is a full council is the full 7 members. I assumed that if one person had stepped down, then the full council would be 6 members at that time. That's not the case. A full council is actually 7 members. If I understand correctly, the way you just worded it, if there's one person missing that has resigned, what your full council would be then would be 6 members.
That's
And-
correct.
And that's not what the original intent of the charter was. And I also got outvoted with that.
Okay, a point of information before we continue. There was a motion on the floor. I'm not sure if that motion was seconded. I'd like a second. Could somebody second the motion just for discussion purposes?
So moved.
Thank you. So now we have a motion. It's been seconded and we'll continue with the discussion on this subject matter. Is there any other, Pat?
So let me ask through the chair, Ralph or anyone else, is there a place in the bylaws that the term full council is used that would keep the council from making a decision or making a decision if someone was ill?
Yeah.
Or must it always be 7 members?
Is that, well, I'm going to defer to Don, please.
The only time that it picks up to my mind is the reorganizing president and vice president. We have it as it has to be a true full council, which I'll hold discussion on that topic later, but that's what comes to my mind. And then there's other spots that simply use the word majority, meaning the majority who's there. So we could have a 3-1 vote with 4 people and that would pass based on some other language. But to get back to your first point, yeah, the only time I see it, the word full council is reorganization.
Ralph?
So when we discuss a supermajority vote, a supermajority of a 7-member council would be 5. A supermajority of a 6-member council would only be 4. So it does come into play when you are discussing a supermajority of the full council. That's why the full council should be 7 members.
Pat?
I still have to ask, what does the words notwithstanding
Where does it
any
say?
vacancy that might exist add to that? If it just said that the definition of the full council is the full authorized complement of the town council, period, there would be no question that it was 7 members. And the notwithstanding makes it confusing.
Okay, so I would like to hear from the chairperson on the exclamation, and we all know that he's probably 5 minutes out. So what we could do is move to the, I believe, hopefully I'm seeing him chiming in. We could come back to this. We could move to page 6 and continue there, and then we can get a description of the legal paraphernalia in the, or paragraph in that, Pat, and hopefully that will answer anyone's questions. Marilyn?
Before we leave this question of Pat's, this was submitted to the committee by Pat in his suggested modifications to the Home Rule Charter. This was the very first item that we as a committee discussed at great length. And the language that you see in the charter being proposed this evening is the decision that the Charter Committee made based on your original question, Pat, that we've worked very long and hard to try to figure out, you know, notwithstanding, in spite of a vacancy, it's 7 members. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay. So Pat, if you'd like further clarification from the chair of the Charter Review.
No, I will withdraw
revisit-
my motion.
Or you withdraw your motion.
I will withdraw my motion. It appears I am the only one that finds notwithstanding not to say in spite of, but I will withdraw my motion. If Kathy will withdraw the second.
I will withdraw the second based on Pat's comments.
Okay. On the withdrawal of the motion in the second, I believe we should probably roll call vote this and have that taken off the floor. Marilyn?
Yes.
No, you don't need to.
You don't
There's no
need to.
motion.
We
There's
don't
no
need
motion on the floor.
Yeah, there is no motion. to
Comfortable
do.
without voting, okay. The motion in the second, it has been rescinded. And I would move to, I believe, well, we're gonna go to page 5, correct?
Yes.
So the first comment on page 5 is I have under town bulletin boards. And I believe the question was presented by Don Anderson. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mike. Yeah, basically what I wanted to do is just have a little more inclusive, not exclusive, but the town bulletin board is still the physical bulletin board in the town hall and others. What I'd like to say is the bulletin board may, in addition to, not in exception to, I would like to have bulletin board matters put on our website and also on our social media feeds.
Okay.
Because the fact of the matter is, in this time, people aren't going to town hall to read that. And we've become kind of more comfortable going on, getting social media to find things. And I think that should be fostered, but in no way in lieu of. We should always keep our traditions of having it posted at the town hall. But I think it should be something to help supplement and get the message out.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Ralph and Marilyn, who obviously were part of the committee, but Marilyn, your hand's up. So this is, maybe you can help Don with some clarification.
And maybe Ralph can help me. I have notes written here next to, because this was raised by Pat Henry in his suggestions, and he wanted to see it online bulletin boards as well. And in the margin, I wrote question mark subject to change. And if I understood the committee's discussion that the bulletin board referred to in the charter is the official bulletin board. Any other means of communication moving forward can happen. But if it's listed here, does it then become an absolute requirement? And what if the technology changes? What if something changes with regard to that particular piece? That's why we left it alone. I don't know if that helps, and I don't know if Ralph can add to it.
Ralph?
So Mike, the other thing is the town council by vote can mandate where items are posted. It has to be posted in the town hall. But if they so chose to additionally post it on the TV screen outside or other places, the council has that right to do that, regardless of the charter. We went through this once before. I believe it's under state law that says we choose where everything gets posted.
Okay, Don, would you like to respond?
Basically, what I was going to suggest is after the word locations in the second line below, in the first paragraph, I mean, the second to the bottom in the first paragraph, you say other locations, both physical and virtual, as may be designated as designated town bulletin boards, something as simple as that. Because I think reading this thing suggests locations as physical locations. So, and I think having both in there would be beneficial so that we could designate it under certain circumstances using virtual bulletin boards as well, like we're right here, a virtual meeting.
Okay, well, we've had a little feedback from both Marilyn and Ralph, who obviously sat on that committee. I would defer to the chairman of the committee. Of our charter review, would you like to comment on the language that's currently there, or whether you feel that it should be rephrased?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
You're talking about the definitional section of town bulletin board.
Right.
If you know, it gives the town council the right to designate any other locations. So you can do that internally. It's up to you.
Pat?
I don't like the idea of the town council being able to determine from time to time, even from meeting to meeting, even from day to day, what bulletin boards it might or might not use. I like the idea of having Don's suggestion incorporated here so that we know that as a general principle, we would want bulletin boards to include virtual.
Okay, so Tom?
Yeah, I would agree with Don and Pat. I think putting Don's language in there does not hurt it. I think our intent is to make things clearer. And I wouldn't want to muddy the water with having this in the charter and then doing something outside the charter as the council sees, as Pat mentioned.
Okay, I can say, and then we'll let the chairman comment. I wouldn't be opposed to it as long as the language added does not change the original intent of what the charter review put forth. So I'll defer to Mr. Levine.
I don't think the committee would have a problem with that. The more the merrier. More notices that go out, that's fine. And if you want to make it a requirement within the charter, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Ralph?
So Don, would you go through that once more? All you're saying is that the location is either virtual or physical?
Physical or virtual.
Right.
So is that the actual language that you want to add in?
Well, that's what I was going to tweak a little bit. It says, basically, I think I would have it at other locations, virtual or physical, as may be designated town bulletin boards by the town council. You can tweak it if you wish, but that's the gist of it. And the bulletin boards at any other locations, maybe physical or virtual, as may be designated town bulletin boards by the town council. So maybe start it with physical, which is what the more common understanding, and then adding, or virtual.
Okay. I'm under the impression that the charter review committee would agree with the modification.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
So we're accepting as is. I don't believe we need a motion or vote on it. We're just going to make the change. It's now recommended by the review committee. So as long as somebody's documented those changes, we can.
Mike,
Go ahead.
point of order. So the review committee can't have a meeting here so that as a whole committee, we can't vote on this. So as a council, we're going to have to take a vote on it.
Agree.
Okay, so then if we could have that
In a motion?
form of a motion in a second.
Okay, I'll make a motion that on page 5, first paragraph, town bulletin boards, on the third line, that it shall read, bulletin boards at any other locations, physical or virtual, as may be designated town bulletin boards by the town council.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any further discussion? Kathy?
I think the words physical or virtual should be offset by commas on both ends.
Yes.
Because you're defining then what location means, so there needs to be an offset there.
Okay.
It's just a grammatical
Phraseology.
addition.
So fair to say phraseology remains the same. We'll add the proper punctuation. Any further discussion? Don?
Or after physical, have and or virtual.
Okay.
As opposed to one not being exclusive of the other.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Okay. Any further?
I'll amend my motion accordingly.
Thank you.
And my second.
All right. Any further discussion? So we'll roll call. I am a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes,
Don?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion passes. Moving right along, we're down to Article 2 under Town Council. And the question marked here I have under Section 2.1 is from Pat Henry.
Yes, the last section regarding the compensation for town council members. This is going to be quick. I think that any changes to our compensation should be more than just a simple majority. I would move that any change to compensation of town council members should be by supermajority vote.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
The motion's been made and seconded. We'll start with discussion with the council. Pat?
As the maker of the motion, I just want to point out that we don't see any harm right now, but you never know what could happen in terms of some group wanting to reduce or eliminate compensation and some group wanting to increase it or double it. And so I thought that it's a pretty important thing, and it sends a signal that supermajority vote will be required to change our compensation. That's the only reason I suggest it.
Okay. Any other questions from the council? Ralph?
So would you be making a motion to add another line that says town council compensation must be a supermajority vote of the council? Because
My
it's still
motion was
to be set in the town budget.
yes, it would be another sentence. Any change to the compensation of town council members should be by supermajority vote. Another sentence.
Okay. So the motion has been amended, and do we still have a second from Tom O'Connor?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. How about, is there any suggestions from Charter Review?
Pat had brought up a similar suggestion in our other discussions, and his prior comments, he wanted by a vote of the full council positions that are then filled. So this is a new issue. Supermajority has not been discussed by the committee.
Okay, thank you.
And that request by Pat, there was no action on that particular request.
Okay. Having a motion and a second on the floor, we will roll call vote. I'm going to start over on the left here. Marilyn?
No.
Ralph,
No.
Pat,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Don,
No.
Kathy,
No.
and I'm a no as well. Okay, if we move on, same page, down to section 2.2 under eligibility. Tom O'Connor, I believe you had a question or comment?
Yes, I did. In that paragraph that reads, any registered voter of the town shall be eligible for election to the council. However, no person holding another elective office of the town as established in this charter or any other town bylaw shall take the oath or affirmation of office as a councillor. I'd like to add in state or federal. There could be an opportunity where we might have a state or a federal official who already has an elected position and they take a seat on our council.
Is there any questions from the council regarding that before I ask for it in the form of a motion? Ralph?
I don't know if it's legal for an elected state official to hold another position that's elected in the state. I don't know if under Mass General Law, they're even allowed to do that. It was always my understanding that if you have been elected to something and you're already sitting in another position where you were elected, you had to give up that position. And I think that's the same, both federal and state under law.
Yeah, Mike?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, that's a caveat to adding that. I'm not sure if that statement that Ralph made is true. And if it is, then it's a moot point. But maybe additional research needs to be looked into here for the state and federal to see if that applies. And if it does, there's no change needed. But if it doesn't, then obviously it's something that I think ought to be included.
Before I entertain additional comments, I'm going to defer to the chair of Charter Review again, Mr. Levine. Do you have any comments or anything with Mass General Law pertaining to the conversation?
As far as I'm aware, the committee never received a suggestion like this, and I'm unaware about whether the law precludes, as Ralph has stated. It might so be, but I have no knowledge of that.
Okay, thanks. Well, it sounds like that we would take no action at this point in time, but gather more information. So this would be an item to revisit. Would we agree?
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to mark it up as a revisit. And we are on section 2.3 under the president and vice president and clerk. Don, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I know this was a recent add-on where we had it for to have the full council and so forth to reorganize because of vacations and so forth. But one thing we discovered in the past year is this, being able to go on a Zoom meetings. I could be somewhere and I'd still be able to come in. So I don't want to create, one of the things I look for is loopholes that may be unintended. And we could have a situation in some future time where you have a president and vice president that frankly don't want to give up control after an election. And all they have to do is have strategically one person miss a meeting over time and then be able to control a couple months into the future. So my suggestion would be this provision shall not exceed 30 days from the date of election, at which time a supermajority may reorganize the council.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All right. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. I'll entertain any further discussion from the council at this point in time. Marilyn?
Don, could you read it again, please?
Okay, at the end it would be, this provision shall not exceed 30 days from the date of election, at which time a supermajority may reorganize the council.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there any further discussion from the council? Pat?
I would definitely support what Ralph said. In fact, I tried to do this the last time that this was changed. I tried to point out that this could result in just what Don described, and I was outvoted.
Okay. I'll defer at this time. Charter review, any suggestions or comments relative to the subject matter?
No, this issue, this suggestion, this new suggestion was never presented to the committee, nor therefore discussed.
Okay,
The committee hasn't discussed it.
thank you. Ralph?
Just one point of thought. Don, you've got 30 days. Typically in the summer, we only meet once a month. So if someone can't make it on the July meeting, then what you're saying is the first meeting in August, a supermajority could reorganize. I mean, am I correct in that?
Yes, I mean, I'm open for conversation on that. My point is there really shouldn't be a situation where we can't, even for a few minutes, have everybody available, especially with Zoom meetings. And I just don't think keeping the past president and vice president into a new term for effectively 15-20% of that term makes any sense, unless you come up with 45 days or something. But at what point do we want to carry the previous president, vice president over without affording the new council an opportunity to reorganize?
Okay.
I mean, I'm not married to the 30 days, and
No,
I see what you're saying. I just couldn't come up with anything better.
I understand that.
Pat?
Just quickly, my alternative was to take away the full council and say that any majority could vote, so that no matter who was missing, everybody knows that the first meeting is the reorganization meeting. So that was the only other alternative. Don asked for an alternative. That would be the alternative, is simply leave it subject to the counselors then present. I like his better, though.
All right, well, that being said, is everyone comfortable with the 30-day rule? And if so, if there's no further discussion, and hearing and seeing none, we'll roll call vote it with Tom O'Connor,
Yes.
Don Anderson,
Yes.
Kathy Hill,
Yes.
myself, yes, Marilyn Richards,
Yes.
Ralph Page,
Yes.
and Pat Henry.
Yes.
Okay, we have a change to section 2.3. Okay. I have page 6 in front of me right here, and if we go down to all meetings of the council, Ralph, is that, was it, no, is it Pat Henry, I believe? Pat, you had a question regarding that?
Not that paragraph.
Kathy.
It was mine.
Okay.
I'm
I can't
looking
read my
at,
own writing.
in that paragraph, all meetings of the council and any subcommittees thereof. If you go down to the next to the last line where it begins the council, non-resident employees and other interested parties may be allowed to speak at the discretion of the council. I'm thinking, since the chair runs the meeting, it would be the chair who recognizes a speaker or not. And I'm wondering if there would be a consideration for removing council and substituting chair, or chair of the council, just, bumping those two words into it.
Okay, I would just ask Ralph.
So Mike, actually, after reading this, I would agree with Kathy. It should be the chair, because it includes subcommittees. And so you wouldn't want to have to go back to the council to get a ruling. I think if we changed from council to chairman, the chairman can let other members of the public, employees or whatever speak, because it may be during a subcommittee meeting that it happens.
Okay. Jeannie?
Yes, I think the correct language should be president, council president, to be consistent with the charter.
Except if it's at a subcommittee meeting, the council president may not be present.
I agree with that.
Right, because it does say, state on the top line, all meetings of the council and any subcommittees. So council president sitting in the capacity of ex officio. If we just had the language president, I can see that it would work in both situations, both types of meetings. Kathy?
What if you said at the discretion of the council president or the committee chair? And just put both in there, and then it covers
Yeah,
Covers both.
either
I would
situation.
agree with Kathy, yeah.
I agree with that too.
That's why we're here.
Kathy, if that's a motion, I'll second it.
Yeah.
It's a motion. I move that. We substitute the, for the council, the words president, council president, or committee chair.
Okay, Kathy has a motion on the floor, and I didn't note who seconded it.
I did, Mike.
Ralph, okay. A motion's been on the floor and seconded it. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Tom O'Connor,
Yes.
Marilyn,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Kathy,
Yes,
Ralph,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes,
and Don.
Yes.
Okay, we have a change there. Language change. Just below that, on page 6, Pat, you had a comment, I guess. And are you still with us? There he is.
yes, the last paragraph
Yes.
indicates that minutes should be provided, but the words "not later than the regularly scheduled meeting" have been removed. And it seems to me that there might be a slip, it might be missed, but the intention in the charter should be that the minutes should be available at the next scheduled meeting for us to see and approve. So I wonder where that came from.
Ralph, I see your hand up, yeah.
So, Pat, if we continue this meeting till tomorrow, or have another meeting tomorrow to continue on, that would mean that Jeannie would have to have all the minutes done from this meeting by tomorrow or the next day. And although she's extremely good and all, sometimes the time pressure, we felt maybe too much. And for that reason, we thought we would remove that language. Like I said, I think 99 out of 100 times by our next meeting, the minutes are done. It's just if we're holding a couple in a row for some major reason, it may not happen.
Okay. Pat?
As I indicated, I know it may not happen, but I worry about not sending the signal that the charter really wants the minutes to be done as soon as possible. That's all.
Okay. Did you want to, so we can, do you want to phrase it in terms of a motion with a
Yes.
second and we'll vote?
I move to make no change to the existing language of the charter requiring that the minutes of each council meeting shall be made available no later than the next regularly scheduled council meeting.
Okay, we have a motion, and is there a second? I do not see a second at this time. Without a second, I will mark it as no change. And I will move us along to, I believe, page 7. If we start at the top, under section 2.5. Tom, was that a question you had?
Initially, I'm going to withdraw the question.
Okay. So down to 2.6 under town bylaws, Pat Henry?
Yes, thank you. Our existing procedures for adopting bylaws are very cumbersome. I mean, I think I described in the last meeting the process we had to go through for the tiny little change we're making to the kennels. The town council had to consider the recommendation, send it to the bylaw committee. Bylaw committee reviews it, makes recommendations back. Town council considers the recommendation, sends it to planning board. Planning board creates the red line description of the bylaw change, publishes it in a reminder, holds 2 public hearings, votes to change, and returns to the council. Council refers to the town attorney. Council reads the proposed bylaw 2 consecutive meetings and votes to approve. In other words, so many handoffs, so much time. But the review committee actually suggested adding 2 new requirements, adding the publishing the proposed bylaw yet again, and requiring the council to hold another public hearing. Now, I don't think this body meeting in session can reasonably craft an alternative to, in the short amount of time we have, to this very complex back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the only suggestion I have is that this is a very, very cumbersome and unworkable situation. And I would like to see a subcommittee look at this and see if they can come up with something a little more streamlined.
All right.
Hey, Mike,
I'm
can I
sorry.
address that just real quick?
Mhm.
Pat, there's 2 types of bylaws, a zoning bylaw and a general bylaw. A general bylaw doesn't go to the planning board at all. Under state law, any zoning bylaw has to go to planning board and they have to hold a public hearing. Currently in the charter, we are not required to hold a public hearing for a general bylaw. That's why we added this language in. I mean, we know, like I said, the planning board has to, but we only have to read a general bylaw at 2 meetings and then vote on it. We don't have to hold a public hearing. We don't have to get the public input. And it was my suggestion, along with others, that a public hearing, we tend to hold them, and I think it's important to. That's why that particular language on a general bylaw was added.
All right, thanks. Marilyn?
This particular issue was a huge sticking point for some folks when we were going through the Charter Commission in terms of transparency and the ability for folks to know when bylaws were proposed to be changed. And so it may seem cumbersome, but it's driven by statute, and it's also driven by the fact that the Charter Commission recognized that the town needs to have an opportunity to weigh in on some of these important changes. So that's why we ended up with the language that we ended up with.
Okay. Tom?
Mike, just a general question to the committee and the group. Should we separate out the zoning and the general to be clearer?
And your questions is related to the committee?
Yeah, I don't know who would answer it. It's just a general question to the group. To me, it sounds like we're talking about both of them in one paragraph. And from what I just heard, it sounds like there's a distinct difference between the zoning bylaw and the general bylaw in the process.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Ralph if he or Marilyn has any input or suggestion on that relative to your question, or I can default to the chair of the committee. Ralph or Marilyn, any comments on Tom's concern?
So I think by adding in this language, we've basically made it uniform. So whether it's zoning bylaw or general, they're both now going to have a public hearing, and pretty much the way going forwards is going to be pretty close to uniform, with the exception of obviously a zoning bylaw, no matter what bylaw, has to go to planning for their input. So I think we've addressed most of it. Marilyn, what's your take on it?
As you move further in this section, we've also addressed how the vote takes place, a general bylaw will require a simple majority and a zoning bylaw will require a supermajority. And that's clarified at the end of the section. So I'm fine with it.
Okay. Does anyone else need any clarification? Would they like more further clarification from the committee? Or if not, there is not a motion on the floor at this time. So is any other clarification required? I'm not seeing any at this time, so I'm assuming we are taking no action on 2.6. And we're moving to page 8, down at the bottom, under section 2.8 vacancy. I believe Jesse wrote a response to this, as well as, and Pat Henry had a question.
No,
The question is on the vacancy. I don't see that Jesse wrote anything about the vacancy.
it was Ralph Page who had a question.
So Mike, on the section that
vacancy?
starts,
Ralph, did you have a question on the vacancy? Yeah.
so in the section that starts notwithstanding the above, Jesse had submitted a commentary to us that he would suggest adding additional language to that paragraph. So his comment on the side it says, I would add, nothing in this paragraph shall reflect the town. Hold on. Sorry, it's small writing for me.
It's really tiny.
Nothing in this paragraph shall relieve the town or town council from its obligations to comply with all applicable state laws regarding approval or amendment of bylaws, including specifically compliance with General Law, Chapter 40A, with respect to any and all zoning bylaws. So it's Jesse's suggestion that we add that language in.
Okay. Well.
So Mike, I would make a motion that we follow Jesse's suggestion, and at the end of the highlighted paragraph that we add his language in.
I'll second that.
Okay, I knew Jesse had a suggestion. I had it marked, but I thought it was Pat that had the question. But anyway, we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, we'll roll call vote. Tom O'Connor,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
and Ralph.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna note language added. That takes care of 8. So if I grab page 9 here down the bottom under section 2.10, we'll see if I got this right. I believe,
Michael, there, section 7, I have marked that Pat Henry had a question on vacancy. Right, Pat?
Back on 8, yes. Section 2.8.
that's, okay, that's
Vacancy.
my paperwork being a little messed up. I knew Pat was in there somewhere, and I believe Jesse had a comment on the vacancy as well. So Pat, we'll start with you.
The term in there says the special requires a special meeting. And my question is, why must there be a special meeting? I would propose we just remove the word special. So that any council meeting would be appropriate for that, with the notice published in the local publication as the subcommittee recommended, as the review committee recommended.
Okay, so did you want to form that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I move to remove the word special from from section 2.8 vacancy.
Okay, for discussion purposes, do we have a second?
Second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second now. Is there any further discussion on the removal of the word special?
I have a question for the charter people, charter commission people, Larry or Ralph or, Bill Fonseca, who's in the audience. What was the thinking on the 30 days and the word special? Does anyone remember what what the rationale was for this language?
I think so. You might have a meeting the beginning of a month, and the next regular meeting might not be till the end of the following month. And the commission, I recall, felt that a vacancy and filling that vacancy was so important, and that was the reason for the need to have the special meeting within that shorter period of time. You can hold a special meeting at a regularly scheduled meeting as well. Just post each of them.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Point.
Pat?
If Larry's recommendation is that we can hold a special meeting at the same time as a regular, then I withdraw my suggestion. My worry is that a normal person reading this would indicate that we must call a separate special meeting, and we're not allowed to do this in a regular meeting. And if I'm wrong, then I withdraw my.
Just a point, Mr. President.
Please.
If everyone recalls a town meeting floor, on a regular basis, we would always have a special meeting before the regular town meeting. It's same process during your meetings as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If Mr. Henry is satisfied, then the motion will be rescinded. Is that correct?
Yes, I withdraw the motion.
By Tom O'Connor, rescinded as well.
Yes.
So no action. So you can all help me out here. Prior to the vacancy, which paragraph were we working on so I can mark it on my paperwork?
It says, it started, Mike, notwithstanding the above, the codification of town bylaws.
There it is. Okay.
So at the very bottom of that, we were adding Jesse's language.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yep.
So we're moving over to page 9 now, if I'm correct here, under prohibitions. And I'll start with Ralph with your comments.
So I'm not sure if we talked about this or not. It's still stuck in my head. The very last line where it says, basically it says the town council cannot give orders or directions to a town employee who is not appointed by the town council. My concern is our town council clerk. She's not appointed by us. I don't think we ever really tell her to do something. We ask her to do it. But is that something that we have to think about? You know, I mean, over time, like I said, we direct her, Jeannie, can you get information on this? And it just sounds like when you read this as a whole, we're not even supposed to do that.
Okay.
Mike?
Yes, Tom.
I agree with Ralph. I mean, some time ago, I wrote an enhancement to the charter in the last revision that added the town clerk to the list of department heads that had a special exception with regards to the termination of. The reason for that was, in my tenure, I've seen many instances in the past where there's a conflict where the town clerk is doing work for the council and doing work for the town manager, and serving two, masters, to use that word, is very difficult, and it puts the town clerk at a risk. If doing something for us puts her at odd ends with the town manager. So that protection was put in the charter at that time for that reason. So this brings up another point that maybe it ought to be a little clearer.
Okay, so you're obviously looking for further clarification. Marilyn.
I was going to, through the chair, I was going to ask Tom, do you have any suggestions at how we might change this?
Well, I would say that, I guess if you're looking at it, the town council or any member shall give orders or directions with the exclusion of the town clerk, something to that effect. just singling out the town clerk as an exception to that rule. Because town clerk does work for the council,
But she's appointed by the town manager.
Right.
correct? And that's the conflict.
It's funny, I've never seen it as a conflict. I look at how Jeannie works or how Tom worked for us as a clerk, and I think reasonable requests, I mean, they continue. I called, Jeannie will tell you, I will reach out to her and say, I need some information, and what am I doing here? And she's happy to oblige, but I don't abuse that. And I guess it helps to know that the town manager is truly her supervisor.
Yeah. Mike, if I may, I'm
ahead.
speaking from experience. In the past, we've had issues, and that was put in for the protection of the clerk, not to add a work to the clerk or take away the town manager's management position from the clerk reporting to them. This is not talking about present. This is talking about the future. And since we've seen the issue, we have the opportunity to clean it up. This is an enhancement to the charter that helps us build the future for the charter so that we don't run into this again.
Okay, thanks. Kathy, did you have a comment on it?
I did. I worry when it's expressed that the clerk, the town clerk, works for the council, because that implies that she is subordinate to us. And I don't believe that if you look at the organizational chart, you won't find it that way. I would prefer to look at the role that the town clerk plays as it relates to the council is as administrative support, because the clerk is appointed by the manager and reports to the manager, but she assists the council in obtaining information or researching a particular task or what have you. And so I would not be comfortable with that sense that the clerk works for us. Us meaning the council.
Yeah, Mike,
Tom?
does anybody have the charter available to them? Because in the charter, there's a section that talks about the town clerk and their responsibility to the council.
Numerous publications are here. I have one in front of me, but I see Marilyn picking one up. But prior to that, Jeannie, I saw your hand up earlier. So, and you are muted. Muted.
Thank you, Mike. I understand where Ralph is coming from, and if there was any language in that referring to this position, I would prefer it say clerk of the council and not town clerk.
Yeah.
They are separate duties.
Yeah.
In speaking for this position, I can see, I do answer to the council. I support the clerk of the council's clerk of the council, but not really as town clerk. It's not the same.
Right.
Right. Good point, Jeannie.
Thank you.
And Mike,
Go ahead, Ralph.
I'm just curious, the very last line, it says, who is not appointed by the town council. I do not know of any town employee that is appointed by the town council. So I don't even see the reason for that line. I mean, it's set out in the charter that the council does not hire employees. So we have no employee of the council. We don't appoint any employees. So that last sentence can pretty much end at town and take out who is not appointed by the town council. And then if we wanted to add, with the exception of the clerk of the council or something like that, that may clarify it.
Thanks. Pat?
Thank you, Mike. I believe that wording was put there because we do appoint the town manager. And that was the specific exclusion that the council does have the ability to direct the town manager in certain ways. because
I stand corrected. You're right, Pat.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other comments here? Does anyone need any additional supportive information from the charter review? Pat?
is there a proposed language change? I also have a question on this, but later on, it won't have anything to do with this issue. But I'd like to see some language change that we could vote her up or down.
You want to see language change, obviously, for section 210, right? The prohibition.
If we do want to try in some way to separate Jeannie's duties.
All right. I mean, well, we could revisit if that. I'm sorry, Ralph.
No, actually, I saw Attorney Levine with his hand up. I just wanted to point it out.
Thank you. And I'll defer to Attorney Levine.
Larry, not attorney.
Okay, Larry.
If the council will note the next to last paragraph of section 2.2-3, and I don't know if you discussed it prior to my entry, but that talks about the relationship of the town clerk to the council and what role he or she plays as clerk of the council, in addition to the duties provided.
Yes.
I don't know if you need me to read it.
Yeah,
Do you have it in front of you?
I do.
If you don't mind reading it, we'd be happy to listen.
Okay, the town clerk shall be the clerk of the council, period. The town clerk shall give notice of all council meetings to its members and to the public, and maintain minutes and supporting documentation of all council proceedings, period. The town clerk shall also perform such other duties as may be assigned by the charter, bylaw, rules of the council, or as requested by the council president, period.
that's the language I was referring to, yeah.
So then we don't need to.
Okay.
So Mike, with that, I would remove any questions that I have in this paragraph.
Thanks. Well, that was quite a bit of clarification there on the exact duties and delegations.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to mark this. We're not going to take any action on 2-10.
On Tom's question,
Correct.
Ralph.
Ralph's question.
Well,
Now,
I
do
have
you
a
have a separate question, Pat, that you still want to go ahead? Oh, he's frozen.
I thought Kathy had her hand up and was trying to speak.
Well, no, I was waiting to be recognized, that's all.
Kathy?
I didn't call this out before when we were going through the whole document, but if I may, could we go to the top of page 9 with the sentence, town council shall choose a person to fill the vacancy from among the voters by a majority vote of the full council. The next sentence, persons elected to fill a vacancy by the town council shall serve only until the next regular town election.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the word persons, not the word persons, but elected. I'd rather see it selected because it's the council who is choosing the interim replacement. Or chosen or selected. Elected implies there was an election. And it could simply have been a typo. Maybe it was originally the committee felt it should be selected.
I would agree with that, but Pat, I see your hand.
There sort of is an election because it requires a vote by the council. So it's kind of an election.
We had a discussion, if I may, Michael, as a committee, and having gone through this myself, you know, I wasn't elected in an annual election, but I was elected by a vote of the council to fill a vacancy until the next annual election.
Okay.
Okay, I can agree with that perspective.
So what's our pleasure? Is our pleasure to change the phraseology from elected to selected, or?
Then I'll withdraw my comment. I would say, based on Marilyn's clarification, I am okay with the interpretation of the word as it stands.
Me too.
Okay.
Okay.
I want to come back down to 2.10 because we had concerns from Tom that we decided not to take any action on, but I want to be clear. Pat, are you comfortable?
That was Ralph.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And now it's Pat.
Yes.
No,
Now I've got my initials right.
I have a different question. And I'm going to point out that the section 210 rightly prohibits the council or any member of the council from giving any orders or directions to town employees. But the prohibition can be misconstrued to deny our access to town employees. So I would move to add the following sentence to section 210. Notwithstanding the above, any council member shall have the same right of access to any town employee that any resident of the town enjoys to ask a question or seek publicly available information.
Okay, Marilyn.
That's an interesting suggestion, and I would rather see perhaps something like that discussed within our rules, our council rules, rather than as part of the charter. Because as we know, this has come up in your communication policy, which we have yet to iron out. And we do have a town manager that creates policies for the department heads. And there was an issue with department heads at the beck and call of counselors. And so this is something that I don't think belongs in the charter. I think it's something that should be addressed, but not in the charter.
Pat?
I would offer that I don't think our council rules bind the town or the employees or the manager in the same way that the charter does. And this does not, my suggestion does not change any existing policy that the town councilors should have the same rights as any other employee to contact town employees. And so I think it belongs here because this sentence can be misconstrued to say, we're not allowed to contact town employees because we might direct them. And we agree that that would never be appropriate. So I'm looking for a second.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor now and it's been seconded, so we can continue along with further discussion. I would also ask, the discussion can be included from the chair of charter review or any member. Is there any further discussion?
Mike, if I may, could someone please reread the motion for me?
Yes. Notwithstanding the above, any council member shall have the same right of access to any town employee that any resident of the town enjoys, comma, to ask a question or seek publicly available information.
Okay. Any further discussion? Anything from charter review?
This issue had been discussed in great detail by the original Charter Commission and the committee itself. This is I understand where Pat's coming from, but the ability for a town councilor to go directly to the town employee can be somewhat, in many cases, overreaching or undue influence. And the commission and the committee was very concerned about that. And I understand where Pat's coming from, but it was felt that that would be overreaching. I don't know if that's the right term, but rather requests like that should go through the town manager to avoid that improper interference, perhaps. The town councilors hold a great deal of power, and employees might be may give information, etc., that they feel that they're being pressured. And that was the concern of both the commission and the committee. And that's the reasoning behind this.
Thank you. Kathy?
What I wanted to add, and it parallels what Larry is saying, is once an individual is elected to town office and has that title of counselor or whatever, aside the name, perception becomes reality, and the person carries implied power with it, and it can be problematic in the way employees might view who we are as individuals. And I think that is also ripe for, problems and the destruction of positive relationships. Obviously in its worst case scenario, but it still is a temptation to feel obligated to a counselor.
Okay. Pat?
Well, following that logic would imply that no town councilor can ever ask a question of any department head, following that logic. Now, obviously, we understand that wouldn't mean if we were working on a committee that we couldn't ask detailed questions of that sort. But what we're saying is that our powers as citizens have been taken away because we are becoming town councilors. And I reject that. Also, because people are maybe uncomfortable with a request that we make. Remember, the request is for any publicly available information or to answer a question. That's all that we're saying. If people are uncomfortable with that, that's kind of too bad. We're still sharing the responsibility for running the town, and to do that, when a citizen asks us for information and we tell that citizen, I'm sorry, we'll have to go through our council president and the town manager, which then become a huge bottleneck. I see this is a dangerous stepping stone that takes away the power of the town council to do what a normal citizen would do and say, hey, where's the trash truck? I believe what I'm saying is innocuous. What I'm proposing is innocuous.
Okay. Don?
I'm listening to what Larry's saying and what Pat's saying, and I really do think there's a balance in there. There's one thing to have each council person act as council president, which is what we don't want. But Pat makes a fair point. We shouldn't also be in a situation where we can't be as a citizen, because one of the things that led us to where we are right now is we are, just by our nature, concerned about our town and want to get involved. I can imagine a situation when I was, as chair of the Planning Matters subcommittee, talking to Don Mackey and asking him, hey, are you available this time to have this meeting or that meeting? And then question myself is, should that question have been relayed through the town manager, or should that question have been relayed through the town council president? Again, so I think the wording that Pat has of not giving us, just recognize that we have the same rights of any citizen to basically ask questions that are available to the public, not asking for, matters that should run through other channels, but basic core information. I think that's fine. I'm replaying the wording that he has in my head, and I'm not seeing any issues with it.
Okay. Marilyn?
I absolutely, through the chair, agree with what you just said, Don. You know, I think that we can act as citizens right now. I don't believe this language prevents us from going into the town clerk's office and asking for some application form for something or some information on a license as a resident would. The operative word here is giving orders or giving directives. And I don't, you know, I feel that's the piece. And I think that we need to question and go on and not take any action on this. I really feel that it's for giving orders and empowering someone. You know, I'm a counselor, you need to do this for me because I need it, rather than is it an appropriate request. Thanks, Bob.
So,
Ralph,
Mike, I'm going to tend to agree with Marilyn. I don't see anything in this paragraph that prevents us from a citizen going in and asking for public information. And if I call and I happen to talk to someone on the phone, you know, if I feel as though they're uncomfortable, I always tell them I'm asking as a resident. So, you know, only give me the information that you can. I just, under this is under prohibitions, which is saying we can't direct the employees to do something. And I think that's accurate. Asking for information, I think we're allowed to do, and I don't think we have to note it in the charter.
Don?
Ralph makes a fair point about the language. I like the language of Pat Henry's, but maybe not in this section under prohibitions. And, you know, and I think Marilyn alluded earlier about having it in our rules and regulations and so forth. If we ever have situations where we're not allowed to speak to people and so forth, then we've just squashed opportunities to run for office, because instead of being an advocate, instead of being an active citizen, we've become less than a citizen because we don't have the rights, and we're deferring basically everything to the council president. So I think there's a place for this language. But Ralph brings a good point about the topic about prohibition. So perhaps in a different spot, as I think about it.
Well, I can all see, you know, where we're headed with this, and it's balance. We certainly want to be able to ask a question from a department head, but sometimes the question can change into dialogue and documents, and now we start taking away from what they want to do. But it's those boundaries. So it's sorting out the language or where the language is inserted. So I'll ask if there's is there any other questions, comments, suggestions? And if not, we do have a motion on the floor and a second. Tom?
Mike, I'd like to see, as Don suggested, that we spend some time reviewing and looking at a place where this would be a better fit as opposed to under prohibitions, because I personally in the past have experienced issues. And I think it's important that we as counselors, who are the voices of the community and the face of our communities, have the opportunity to ask questions that they have asked us of any department head. And I would hate to turn face to a resident and say, geez, I can't ask that question of anybody in the town hall. You need to do it. That's a ridiculous statement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for suggestions here, but off the top of my head, maybe I would suggest that we send a motion in the second at this time and gather more information over the evening. I
do not want to rescind my motion.
Okay, well that's your prerogative. That would be a choice, like I said. But if you chose not to, then we're ready to roll call vote it. So no more discussion, correct? Okay, I'll start with Marilyn.
No.
I'm a no as well. Kathy?
No.
Don?
No.
Ralph? I'm sorry, Tom?
No.
Ralph?
No.
Pat?
Yes.
Okay. It stays as is. So that was page 9. We move to 10. At the top of the page under appointment and qualifications, the first question came from Tom?
It's on, the town manager need not be a resident of the town. In that second sentence, within 6 months. I think we've all experienced changes in jobs that require us to potentially move or relocate. And 6 months is not enough time to properly do that. I'd like to see a change to something in the lines of 12 months, which I think is more appropriate for an individual to potentially sell their home in another community and buy a home in our community without a financial loss involved.
Okay, are we talking about section 3.1?
Yes,
Third paragraph, Mike.
third paragraph.
Third, okay. Thank you for your help with that. That was actually, I believe that was, I had you, your question, Tom, correlated to the appointment and qualifications, but that's not correct. You're correct. Your question is affiliated with paragraph 3.
Right, under that heading.
Okay, so I'm gonna unmark this here. And I believe, Pat, you had a question in this, on that same paragraph, is that correct?
Yes, it's the same question. I agree with Tom that this is not currently an issue and won't be for a time, for quite a while. But if Mary were to retire and another manager be hired, as Tom said, uproot your family, sell and buy a home, move the kids from school. The result of this 6 months is that we will always waive the requirement. And that's not why we put the requirement in the first place. We need a requirement that doesn't force us to waive it. So I agree, it should be 6 months, 12 months.
Okay, you threw me there for a minute, but I see where we're going. 12 months rather than just deviating around the policy because the time frame's too short.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So we'll continue with dialogue here. Marilyn?
Okay, thank you, Mike. In Councillor Henley's original suggested modifications to Home Rule Charter, he had included a section on this particular issue and was asking for 18 months. And so we, as a committee, reviewed it, looked at why the waiver was in the charter in the first place, and that the council could, at its discretion, establish any amount of time as they saw fit, depending on the unique circumstances of whoever's being offered the position. So whether it's 6 months, whether it's 12 months, whether it's 18 months, you know, we felt as a committee that the council had the authority to waive whatever and require whatever, depending on residency. So that's why we didn't do anything.
Okay, so if we're going to continue with conversations based on this, Pat, do you want to make a motion on the change of 6 months to 12?
I could, but I think it was Tom's original suggestion.
was.
Tom has it. Do you have it, Tom?
Thank you. Yeah,
The only reason I'm asking for a motion is just to continue discussion
I
and
understand.
feedback from all parties, including charter review. Tom, would you like to make that motion?
yeah, I move to, that the town manager need not be a resident of the town or of the Commonwealth at the time of appointment, but shall establish residency within the town within 12 months, the change from 6 months, following appointment, unless the town council shall extend such time or waive such residency requirement. I think it's well, that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and I'd like to continue with discussion. Ralph?
So, Mike, the 6 months I think is appropriate, especially with the town council being able to waive it. I believe it becomes a negotiating factor with contracts. And I think that's the way that should be handled. You know, because a resident that there's someone coming in from, let's say, Vermont, they're going to have to move to town within a short period of time, where someone from Hamden, you may completely waive it. So I think we still have, the town council still has the authority to set whatever they so choose in negotiations, and I think that's where it should be done.
Okay, Pat?
I think the important piece of this is not the time, but the signal that it sends that we expect the person to establish residency. My complaint with this is that this forces us in almost every circumstance to waive. And I don't think we should be required to do that. I think it's better to send a reasonable signal so that people that look at our charter can say, oh man, they want us to be there in 6 months. I don't like that. Or they'll look and see 12 months and they'll say, well, that's not an issue. I either move or I won't. So it's the signal we send by 6 months is an unreasonable signal. The signal we send for 12 months is exactly the same, does not take away our rights as a council to waive it or extend it. But I think it sends a more honest signal.
Tom?
Yeah, I would agree with Pat. That's my intent for changing that. I think since this is going to be in the charter and be read by many, if a future town manager were to read this and say 6 months, now I know that's unreasonable and I'm not going to be able to accomplish it in that short a time, then they don't apply. So I'd hate to lose out on potential candidates that may want to apply but feel that the charter is too restrictive. So 12 months, in my opinion, is a more reasonable time frame to allow people the opportunity to sell a home, as Pat stated too, remove children from school and find a new school, and to buy a home in the community that they are going to serve.
Okay, any further discussion from council members? If not, I would like to get the chair of the charter review, Larry, maybe the consensus of your committee.
I see Pat and Tom's point. The committee felt because that the council had the right to waive, and I presume that there'll be discussions with the candidate about that issue during negotiations. But on the other hand, I can see the point that it might dissuade someone from looking at that and saying that's not long enough. So I don't, you know, I don't know that there's either way. I just think that 6 months, you're going to have discussions with a candidate on that issue.
Okay, thanks. Don?
Yeah, I agree with Tom and Pat that when you're looking to trying to field the best pool of candidates, you don't want someone to give up their day job and apply for ours on the mere hope that we're going to waive the residency requirement. But at least having that 12-month period to, you know, test the waters to see how they like it, and then hopefully maybe win the council over to waive it or move to our town, I think it's going to afford a larger pool of candidates potentially. So I would support the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? And I'll remind everyone, the motion is basically to change the time frame from 6 months to 12 months. If there's no further discussion, then we will roll call. And I'll start with Marilyn.
No.
Ralph?
No.
Pat?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Kathy?
No.
And I'm a yes on this one.
1, 2, 3, 4. So it passes.
So the change will be to 12 months, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
In the language. There was a second piece of this. There shall be an annual review of the town manager's job performance conducted by the town council. Pat, did you have a comment with that?
Yes, thank you, Mike. That is actually a duplication of what is already in the town council's responsibilities. So in section 2-5 under the town council, it states the council shall conduct an annual review of the town manager's job performance. And since it's the council's responsibility to perform the review, that's where the requirement should be, and I think it should stay there. This is redundant. And so I don't believe it should be here. It's basically saying the same thing as the town council's responsibility, but it's not a responsibility of the town manager. So I move to delete the final sentence in section 3-1.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
So moved.
And I'm sorry, who was it seconded by?
I was.
Kathy? Okay. So any further discussion? Marilyn?
I understand what Patrick is saying with regard to the duplication, but it has a different meaning in this location. This is under town manager duties and responsibilities. So it indicates that she's going to be responsible for an annual review and whatever, preparation that would require. The council is responsible for conducting it. I think that it's important to be there so that anybody who looks at this charter, who is looking to be a town manager in East Long Meadow, will say, gee, I'm going to be reviewed annually. I just think it should stay there. I think it's not redundant. It has a different meaning here as opposed to under council rules or council section.
Don?
I agree with Marilyn in this particular case. I mean, we're looking at potential future 10, 15 years from now when Mary retires, that we look at future candidates are looking at it. They're not likely necessarily to read the entire council rules as well as the charter. And these bullet points put that future candidate on notice of that, the council will have watchful eyes and expect to do performance reviews.
Okay. We still have that motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Pat?
In my legal courses in school and everywhere, all the contracts I wrote at Mass Mutual, the thing we were always told is to be very, very careful not to put the same term in two different places, because there will always be that little bit of difference between them and that conflict that exists. So that's the reason why I brought this up. This kind of violates a general principle of not having the same term in two places. But I'm happy with whatever happens.
Okay, I would just ask myself, I don't have the terminology in front of me on where, you said under council rules, I believe, correct?
2-5, yes.
That's right.
Oh, does anyone have 2-5 in front of them?
I do, Mike.
And
So,
Larry's raising his hand.
If you could read that, it would be great.
so you want me to read it, Mike?
Please.
So under 2-5, it says, the council shall conduct an annual review of the town manager's job performance, a summary of which shall be available to the public.
Okay. I believe, any other discussion from the council members? Any discussion from charter review?
What Marilyn said is correct. It's just giving more emphasis of the duties and obligations of the town manager, and it was intentional that it was left in both places.
Okay. So Pat's concern, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the phraseology was the same. And from a legal aspect, I would have to default to an attorney. It did sound different to me. I know it's the same point that you're driving, but I just wouldn't want to be caught in any legal battle. And it doesn't sound like it could cause a legal problem. Just my opinion at this point. Pat?
My final point, I would point out, everyone's saying this is the responsibility of the town manager to have this, but it says there shall be an annual review. And that's a passive tense. So it's doesn't make sense. It's not saying the town manager has to do anything or prepare anything or be responsible. It's not her job. It says there shall be.
There shall be. Okay, any further discussion? Tom?
Yeah, I mean, Pat just brought up a good point. This is just a statement.
Mhm.
It's not an actionable item. There shall be an annual review. So it's just a statement that's placed in there, and does it really have any teeth or a reason to be there?
Well, I
So-
understand everyone's concerns. Ralph?
So Tom, as you noted in the last paragraph with the 6 months or 12 months, someone coming in to look at a job, they're going to read what's under the town manager. And it's letting them know that every year you're going to be reviewed. I think that's the most important thing. And I think we were, as a commission, initially, we were just trying to let the manager know, you're going to have an annual review. And then we let the council know it's your job to do it. That's why I think it's in both spots.
I would say if we were looking to remove it, it could be removed from council rules rather than taking it out of the charter. If
No.
everyone was that concerned about having it in two places, that does kind of coincide with section 3.1 in general. Marilyn, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Mike. Just for information, this was also one of Pat Henry's suggested modifications to the Home Rule Charter. And it was discussed extensively by the Charter Review Committee. And the feeling was that that being located in two different places was for a reason. We've all said why, under town council duties, and the other is under town manager appointment or town manager position. It's informational. It may not be actionable, but it certainly is important information. So we've already discussed this.
Pat?
I would like to withdraw my motion because it appears that even though this is not a responsibility of the town manager, of the town manager, and it would be negotiated as part of the contract anyway, and any town manager would know that. So hearing the discussion, I withdraw my motion.
Thanks. With the motion being withdrawn, the second is withdrawn as well. And it will be marked no action. We will leave it as is. That concludes the bottom of page 10. And what I'm looking at going forward, if we want to classify it as homework, maybe this evening or tomorrow before we re-intervene, we wanted to revisit, I believe it was the eligibility, I believe on page 5, section 2.2 under eligibility. Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can get some more information and then we'll be able to complete that segment of page 5, and we'll pick up on 11 tomorrow at 6 p.m. So that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? Marilyn?
Yes.
I am a yes as well. Kathy?
Yes.
And Don?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 8:05. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Get something to eat, and I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening.
Night, everyone.
Good night.